The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
Thank you so much for visiting us, dear Vazil. Always pleasure hosting you. And it's been a while.
Yes,
it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been 2 or 3 years.
2 or 3 years, correct.
That's correct, yes, exactly.
We know and we've delivered various news about yourself, but at the same time, we need to understand the mandate you're covering through your contract. I mean, doing and serving Georgian government, especially Prime Minister, in the field of investment. And then we will follow some cases as well. Please.
Sure, yes. Great to see you, great to be with Forbes again. And yeah, when I finished my work as Vice President at the European Investment Bank, which was at the end of 2019 in Luxembourg, and I was thinking about my future career, what to do, I decided that I would go into a kind of advisory consultancy role with governments and companies in Central Eastern Europe, area which I know, I think, quite well and where I have some experience.
You do.
I'm actually involved in different projects with different government entities and.
So it's not just Georgia.
It's not just Georgia. Yes, it's not a full-time job. It's a part-time arrangement, and it is based on the fact that we have known with the Prime Minister of Georgia we have known each other for some time. And when we met, I think it was back in March or April, he basically suggested that I could join his team of advisors as advisor who would focus on foreign investments.
It was already 2021.
It was already 2021, so this year. So it's a very recent arrangement. So it's part-time, it's focused on bringing more foreign investment into Georgia. And I'm basically one of the members of the group of advisors who work with the Prime Minister.
Okay. Can you identify, I mean, other governments, if it's not disclosed, of course,
yes.
You are serving and advising, and is it the same mandate, what you have in Georgia, or it's a bit different?
It really differs from country to country. So, for example, in the Czech Republic, I helped to create a kind of governmental fund, investment fund. It's called National Development Fund, where I'm a member of the board, so-called National Investment Council. And the idea of the fund is to invest into PPP, public-private partnership projects. So I think it's quite an interesting entity which brings some money from banks, from government together to invest into PPP projects. In Slovakia, I'm advisor to the governor of the National Bank of Slovakia, as well as on the board of largest Slovak bank called Slovak Savings Bank. And in Hungary, I'm on the board of Budapest Airport, which is the main international airport of Hungary. So these are some of the mandates.
Slovakia is the reason why Mr. Hudák is with us. He's
today.
He's accompanying governmental and businessman delegation
on business forum.
On business forum.
Correct. Yes.
How it goes is it was interesting and still goes on.
It still continues. Yes, it's a relatively quick visit. So we arrived only yesterday evening. And this evening we are already departing for Baku.
But never miss a chance to visit Georgia.
Come here.
Yes,
of course. Come here at the Forbes studio.
Forbes studio.
And Forbes, yes, exactly. Yes. Tbilisi and Georgia is of course very close to my heart.
If you remember when Vazil was appointed as advisor to Prime Minister, the only pictures which were distributed to the Georgian media were pictured in our studio.
That's great.
That's so true. And especially I have to thank him. This was just a mere email that we sent out to him, and he was ready to.
It doesn't matter. He's vice president of AIB or consulting. It's Vazil Hudak.
We have close relationship.
Yes, very, very.
It goes beyond a specific position or institution.
Absolutely.
So yes, so I'm here with this time, although I come to Georgia, I would say every maybe 3 weeks to meet with different institutions, including obviously his Prime Minister and his office, Minister of Economy, Natia, Ministers of Finance, National Bank, international financial institutions, to basically, on one hand, to discuss what are the key impediments to foreign investment in Georgia, how we can remove some of the roadblocks, what are the opportunities, and also how we can bring more foreign investment into Georgia.
Can you share some details of this SWOT analysis with us? What do you see currently as parts of SWOT for Georgia?
I think the analysis is a kind of ongoing process, and obviously we have now a very specific period of time because we are still kind of in the COVID situation, although gradually getting out of this. But the impact of COVID is still felt in terms of numbers of COVID cases, in terms of number of visitors who are coming to Georgia. Also kind of some worry among the business people to travel internationally. So all these are things which are, I believe, short-term, linked to the COVID situation, but still they have a negative impact on business activity. So, as you know, there was a drop in GDP, in the economic activity, including investment last year. I think this year we see a very nice increase in the GDP, and I think IMF is predicting that it should be close to 8% and should continue also next year. So these are all good news for Georgia. I think what obviously what investors generally globally are always interested about is stability. Stability of government, stability of institutions, stability of
general
law,
situation.
Kind of general situation to make sure that in the country where they invest there is a stable forecast. It's predictability, predictability of law, predictability of regulations, so that there are no sudden changes which will be caused by political shifts, developments or any other issues. And of course they want to make sure that the overall investment environment, meaning taxation, legal system, etc., that those are all friendly to the investment. So I think from this point of view, Georgia comes out pretty strong. It is, as we know, according to the latest, most recent Doing Business Index by the World Bank, number 7. And if doing business continued, but we have this situation in the World Bank, the IMF, linked to Kristalina Georgieva.
Yes.
And
she survived.
She survived. She survived. She's my good friend. I believe that unfortunately in this case she's a victim of a bigger issue, especially of some competition between the United States and China on a broad range of issues. But this index was just one of the manifestation of this situation. But she survived. Whether the index will survive is a question mark.
Yes, indeed.
So
far it's been abolished. Yeah.
So far it's been abolished. Yeah. I think that some kind of measurement is
needed.
I think it's really needed.
The world needs it.
Yes, I think it's a very good comparison. I mean, we can maybe argue whether this or that criteria is good or bad, and whether the analysis should be improved and be more kind of objective, but the index is very good because it gives a good picture. It's a kind of mirror, yes, for governments to say where we are. Yes.
Yeah, it is good for what? Is it good for like arising the interest on behalf of investors, or
both.
is it?
I think it's investors. Obviously, it gives some indication to foreign investors, especially those who have never been to Georgia. It's one of 180 whatever countries there are in the world. Yes, so. Those investors, they usually use also Doing Business Index as one of the indications for the investment. But it's of course very important mirror for the governments to see how they are doing, what could be improved. And in Georgia, and we had this discussion also today during the meetings of the minister, Georgia wants to get closer to the European Union. It was already mentioned today at meetings with Prime Minister and Foreign Minister that Georgia wants to apply officially for the membership in the European Union in 2024. It's not far, it's basically two and a half years. And there are many reforms which have to happen to be able to get to that level and to
Okay,
to
probably the next question is very clear what it will be. And
Yes.
my next question is, I remember your first public appearance, and then you were as the advisor of the Prime Minister, and you were talking about the EU's support for the kind of like post-COVID period, and you were saying that one of the roles that you would have would be to draw as much support as possible for Georgia out of this pool of EU support. Then a lot of things happens, and then the Georgian Dream refused the second tranche of EU loan, and the reason was that Georgia didn't need any additional loans. However, recently, it was just 2 days ago, right, that the Deputy Finance Minister, Georgi Kakauridze, he admitted that this refusal stemmed from the anticipation that EU would deny this loan anyways, because it was a conditioned loan, and at stake was the most important reform for this country, and that's the judicial reform. And the reason EU would deny us this loan would be the mistreatment of Sharm el-Sheikh agreement as well. Did the Prime Minister consult with you before saying no to this second tranche of the EU loan? And in general, what is your take on this development with our relations with the EU?
Look, I mean, this is very, I would say, very internal, really domestic politics. My agreement with the Prime Minister is that, and frankly, this also reflects my preference, personal preference, is that I don't want to be too much engaged in domestic politics, because I don't see...
preference and mandate as well,
and mandate as well, yes. I mean, my role is not to negotiate in between different political parties or to say who is right, who is wrong. I'm doing, or I want to do my work, especially in bringing for investors for the country, because I think it's good for Georgia. I think that Georgia is the country which has good environment for investment. So,
however, I would argue that this indirectly touches also your mandate and also your responsibility to draw more investments to Georgia, since you agreed to this, because indirectly investors might interpret this refusal also as the less commitment to the judicial reform, and we both know that this reform is crucial for property rights, and not only for citizens, but also for doing business in Georgia.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the few minutes ago, of course, the issue of stability, of transparency, of predictability are very important for investors. This includes also judiciary, independent judiciary. It includes independence of courts and court system. So obviously, and I told Prime Minister openly that obviously such situations as have now arisen with the European Union vis-à-vis the appointment of judges or members of the courts, that this is obviously something that creates question marks for investors. Frankly, for me, it's very difficult to judge whether the way how it was handled was relevant for the internal situation or not. I think that what is important for every government, and look, inside European Union, you have governments like Poland, yes, where the government has been appointing judges, where there was recently a decision made by the Constitutional Court, basically saying that in certain cases the Polish legislation is superior to the EU legislation, which is not liked by Brussels or by the European Commission. So these things happen not only in Georgia or outside of European Union, they happen also inside European Union. That's why, for me, again, I don't want to judge whether this was right or wrong decision. For me, it's important that the message which was sent to investors is a message of some instability and unclarity. So what I advise Prime Minister is to to clarify and to make clear communication to the investor community why these decisions were made as they were made, and to make clear that this is not going to influence in a negative way independence of judiciary.
Of course,
yes.
even from the technical point of view, we look at this refusal. I mean, the EU loan was much cheaper than the loans that the government had to take afterwards, including COVID support as well, and that's why I'm asking you this question. I remember somewhere around in July, it was 2019, still when you were still the vice president. Yes, the EIB vice president, and you said that you were proud that you saw that Georgia was the leader in terms of getting support per capita. Yes, per capita. So do you think this is also kind of question marks not only to the investors but to the donor community as well? Because probably you need to work with them also closely so that this bringing in FDI is kind of like a coordinated process in the country.
Look, I mean, when you look at Georgia from outside, yes, I know that internally this is an important issue, heavily discussed, very emotional. But frankly, when you look at Georgia from outside, it looks pretty good. Yes, and the recent outcome of the recent local elections, where the governing party received over 47% of votes. I mean, in Europe, you don't have a governing party which would receive more than 40%. You have most of the parties in Europe are coalitions. These are parties which are somewhere around 20, 25. If somebody gets 30%,
what just happened in Germany?
It's already a lot. Yes, exactly. It just happened in Germany. The same in Czech Republic recently. Yes, you have coalition parties or governments which are very difficult to govern. And
we need to grow here because if we do not have 51, it's a part of heartbreak.
That's true. So for me, look, I mean, elections are the most democratic way to show what is the feeling of population. And the population basically said, okay, I mean, there are ups and downs, there are maybe things which are not completely okay, but in general, we like the way how Georgia is governed, and we are ready to give another mandate to the government and to Georgia Dream, because this is the governing party, and this was a kind of, for me, a referendum on the government in the recent elections. So yes, of course, issues like appointment of judges, independence of judiciary, they are important, but we should not over-exaggerate. We should not make this kind of main issue that is going to now change the whole situation and picture of Georgia outside. So let's resolve these issues. Let's find a way how to make sure that in the future such situations are not repeated, but I would say let's not make a drama out of it.
Yeah, we're not making a drama, but these are the questions. Please let me focus on the energy sector for a moment here, please, because this sector was very open to the foreign direct investment. It is definitely appealing to the foreign direct investment, but we see these declining figures, and we cannot necessarily link this decline trend of decline to the pandemic, unfortunately. Also, in this sector, we have the Namakwani recent case. We have 84 projects that are still pending because of the opposition from some groups within the society. What is this message? Because these are already anecdotal evidences, right? We have been working on that, and we see that there are like 12 international arbitration cases ongoing already against Georgia. What is this signal, and what does this say about the business environment in Georgia for the investors?
Well, I think it shows that in Georgia you have very strong local democracy, and I mean local groups, mostly environmental NGOs, etc. They have a strong say and influence on these projects, which is a good side of the story. The bad side is then that, of course, many of these projects get kind of stuck in their development. And in general, the situation in the energy sector, as you know, is of course based on the fact that there is a lot of hydropower in the country, which is good because it's a green, clean source of energy. On the other hand, it creates many kind of ups and downs in the electricity supply, because there is water usually in spring, yes, when the snow is melting, but then especially during the winter time, there is actually lack of electricity, and Georgia has to import a lot of electricity. I think in general Georgia needs more diversified sources of energy, of electricity, including other types of renewables. Kind of decrease the dependence on hydro, and to increase especially solar and wind, which are also green sources of energy. But for this to happen, because they are also intermittent sources, so they create a lot of pressure on the grid. And basically, according to the calculations, and there are some studies going on by European Investment Bank and also by some other consulting companies, they show that any increase in the production of renewables and any new investments in renewables, especially in solar and wind, would require some solution on the energy storage side.
Sure.
So that you have a possibility when there is oversupply
systemic, systemic balance.
Systemic balancing of the grid. And
do you think investors would risk to enter the sector where they see that a lot of projects are stalled, and when they see...
There's some terminations in regards of Turkish company Enka, which was close to billion. You're very much aware of that.
Yes.
You are aware from your previous job about Neskra, hydropower with the Korean company. So we are not just talking only about pending, what Elena has mentioned, projects which are more than 40. We are talking about terminated projects. So
those projects are also, we don't know whether they will be finally terminated or not.
Be honest, Vazil's status is unclear.
Okay. Well, my personal feeling, also based on what's happening, is that the era or the time of big hydro projects is over for Georgia. I think that because of the resistance, that's how I feel, because I'm just watching what's happening in the country, a lot of local resistance to this type of big projects. So where I see the future is potentially smaller hydropower stations, and also diversifying clean energy into other renewables, meaning especially solar and wind. For this we need to balance the grid, and a big project which is now being developed and where I'm engaged, and I believe this could be very interesting for Georgia for other reasons as well, is to basically develop this energy storage system in Georgia, which will be diversified. Basically, in the future, I think that any developer or investor who wants to develop solar or wind or hydro should be also obliged to have a storage system, battery storage system next to it, which would allow to store electricity when there is oversupply, and then so it's balancing. And what I discussed with Prime Minister and also with the Minister of Economy is that if there is going to be such a relatively big demand internally for batteries, for this battery storage, let's use it to also create the production of batteries in Georgia, because batteries are now a new segment of global economy, both for energy storage as well as for electromobility. So, and I think Georgia needs to identify few areas of kind of new strategic economic development and growth and investment. And I think this type of battery production could be very interesting niche for Georgia, not only for the needs of Georgia, but also for the whole region. So I'm talking about, we are talking about the kind of regional battery hub in Georgia, which will include the production of batteries, starting with battery storage, creating this decentralized battery storage system in Georgia. Also, I'm talking to my compatriot Maroš Šefčovič in the European Commission, Vice President. The European Commission has funds for so-called battery academy. So basically, we need to train people who would have the skills for this industry. And we can also develop, for example, battery recycling capacity. So we would have this kind of circular economy element from the production of batteries and the skills training and so on.
Sounds attractive.
Yes, and hopefully we'll see some new companies entering Georgia also, because if you look at the structure of FDI in Georgia, you can practically see no new investors, no new companies. They are actual foreign investors that are doing the business in Georgia. What is the remedy in that direction? What is your vision to that?
I think that we, on one hand, we need to come up with some new attractive propositions, new interesting areas. I think this battery area, electricity or energy batteries are very interesting new opportunity where there are many investors. There is now a lot of money, I would say probably too much money for clean energy and green investments. So I think this is one area which is very interesting. We are also discussing with, for example, with Rothschild Financial Group.
That was my final question in this regard.
This potential idea of creating a regional financial hub in Georgia, because what we see in the financial sector and in fund and in fintech area, we see that many companies are moving or looking for new areas which will have good legislation, regulation, and so on. So we believe that Georgia could become such a hub for Eurasia, and we are starting to work on this. So I think we need to be kind of open-minded, innovative, and to identify also new areas which would correspond to new trends in global economy.
The acting head of Rothschild family, while visiting Georgia, you co-hosting her together with the Prime Minister. Let me say so. Now we understand the purpose of this visit, while having just general information while the visit was held. Was there anything missing, Mr. Hudak, while you are advisor to Prime Minister Garibashvili, besides the Rothschild family visit here, whether there was some interest for any groups you are engaged worldwide, not while being the vice president of the AIB, even before and after. So whether there was some other interests like Rothschild family, did we miss anything, or it's still on the pipeline?
Do we have a pipeline?
There is a pipeline, and of course I cannot say that I know about every investor who is interested, but
you didn't miss much, trust me, in this regards. No, maybe on your behalf, if there anything we might miss. That's my question.
Well, as I mentioned, I think in this battery business there are, and we already had at least 3 companies globally from US, Europe, China, who came here to explore this opportunity for the investments in the battery industry. So this is something which is moving and I think very promising. We are working on this financial hub idea. So there are some fintechs which are also interested in this. There are some large industrial companies from Europe and USA which are also interested in moving some of the production here. It's probably too early to talk about the names, but basically for most of them it's the idea of Georgia becoming a regional hub and a springboard to expand the production to other countries in the region.
And my last question to sum up. Can Georgia's economy reach boiling point without FDI in the country?
I don't know what is boiling point. That's a big question. What would that mean in reality? No, I think that Georgia, and again, I come from Slovakia, so it's similar size of countries and economies, and in Slovakia, 85% of GDP is from exports. It's very much export-driven country, which allowed Slovakia to grow and to develop economically, also to increase the living standard for its citizens. So I think Georgia also is kind of destined to be an export-driven economy, which means that it requires for investment, and I think that hopefully together with Georgian government, companies, with enterprises will be able to bring more investment here.
Yes, we're here to host you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.